Okay, my name is Dave Crompton. I'm one of the associate pastors at Faith Baptist Church in Hamilton, New Jersey. And knowing Alan Bush, that he was involved in Permeate and evangelism training, and hearing much about it, we pastors wanted to support him. So all of us went along with probably 30 some people from our church at that time in the spring of 2025 to here and be part of his training. So I would say that it probably wasn't anything new that I was hearing, and I've been blessed to be part of Evangelism Explosion training, dozens and dozens of people over the years. But what I love about Permeate and about Alan is even what's on the back of his church, creating a culture of evangelism in the local church. I wanted that, and evangelism has always been a heartbeat and a passion of mine. But I admit at times that sometimes winds of coldness have blown across my soul, and I forget the loss and get going on in life. So knowing Alan and just hearing Permeate and seeing that desire just refresh me, continues to refresh me, and challenges me. So that's how I got to know Permeate. So being part of the training in the spring and enjoying that, and having sent my heart awoken and realized that the preciousness of sharing the gospel, so I would continue on, and opportunities would come of sharing the gospel over the months following. The weekend that they had it at our church, I had a previous commitment to celebrate my daughter's 40th birthday in New York prior to me knowing that they were doing the training. But I made sure I was back Saturday night so we could be part of Sunday afternoon. And just the training Sunday afternoon, or I should say the outreach Sunday afternoon was so precious. We had some 30 people that went out to, as John Mark told, to the Oktoberfest and the outreach that we had across the street at Veterans Park. And it was just sweet to see the people's interest and desire. And I took a bunch of tracts that I had written years ago in our church, How to Get to Heaven from New Jersey. And so I started with a friend of mine, but then he went solo on his own. And I'm out, just go up to people and hand them and say, can I give you something from our church? And that became a nice bridge into the gospel. And as they're reading the title of the tract, I said, you ever think about that question? How to get to heaven from Jersey? And I said, reality is you could get it's from heaven from anywhere. And they would start talking, so well, what do you think? And right away we're into the gospel, and they're talking, well, I believe it's by works, I'd be a good person. Or some might say, well, I don't believe there is a heaven. But it opened up conversation. And I probably 12 people, great conversation. There was one man that I spent probably 10, 15 minutes with and talking through, and he didn't seem in any bit of a hurry. I went through the whole gospel presentation with him, and I regret to this day, honestly, that I did say, be bold enough to ask him for his number. Hey, can we connect and get together again? Because I'm hesitant to press people if they're asking questions and I'm guessing they're hungry to know. But he was more like almost a robot just listening to me. But so I kind of wish that I had gotten his number and followed up later. But it was precious to me to see people from our church that have been part of the Permeate and this desire in evangelism, sharing the gospel. And my understanding is not a one and done. As I hear in the pastors in our office that, hey, we want to try to, and that's what I want to do. I want to try to connect with maybe once a quarter or going out on these outreaches with Alan. And it's to the point where I presented to my D group. I have 3 guys that we get together every Tuesday night for an hour, and it's a commitment for a year. And I said to them, I want to, when I get back, I'm going to be away a couple weeks in November. But when I get back, we're going to take 15 minutes of our hour, and we're going to talk about how to share the gospel. I'm going to go over again and train you in that so you're comfortable, and we're going to start going out and doing that. The 4 of us go out and just take opportunities to share. So they've been, I think, 2 of them have been to the Permeate, but I think there's always ways to keep solidifying, going over how would you handle this conversation, but just to know the core and how to share the gospel and go forth. So bottom line is I'm grateful to Alan, and I've expressed that to him. Our church needs this. And I think it's receptive, it's fertile ground, the people want to be out sharing the gospel, and we want to make a difference for God. We don't want to just do church. We want to live out Christ through our lives. You know what? It has. I'll preface it with, I think the bigger difference isn't so much the conference, but it's really Alan and Joan and their heart for the Lord, just being in our midst. I tell Alan, and I didn't tell you this, but even preaching at Hannah's Baptist last Sunday, I referenced you, and I told somebody, if I had three, and I've told them this before, but if I was running a church at three couples, I would want Alan and Joan to be one of my couples. It's just because their genuineness in living it out. And I tell them, stay low, stay humble. You're hearing it. But just live out the faith. So whether Permeate or the Bush's influence was more precious, is maybe both go together. But yeah, to hear that 70 people went to the conference and 25, 30 went out sharing the gospel, and to hear John Mark, who I knew before he accepted Christ, I knew him the last 30 years, to hear his excitement and desire and the opportunity to share the gospel with one young man, and it was pretty sweet. Yeah, so I think there's encouragement, and it's first step. It's not the end step. Just keep encouraging, building, and how people can keep growing in knowledge, how to share the gospel. What if you get in this? But just be sharing it. Don't sit on it, and that's a message we need to keep hearing. Thank you. When I spoke at Hannah's Baptist Church for the first time 4 weeks ago, I stood up and said, I love Hannah's Baptist Church for two reasons. The first reason is, in the 1960s, you had the vision to plant a church in Cherry Hill, Bethel Baptist Church. In 1972, my family started going to that church. And there one Sunday morning, as a 12-year-old boy, I heard the gospel presented by a ventriloquist named Dr. Bill Fusco, who was a missionary to Italy. And God just used that to grab my attention, riveted. I was afraid of the reality of hell. And he invited people to come forward and end the service. I went backwards. I ran out the church door to my parents' car and just cried out, God, I know that I'm a sinner. I know it's not by what I can do, that Christ is God the Son, that he died on the cross for my sin, shed his blood, and rose again. I'm trusting in Christ alone. And so that was the beginning of my journey with God. That's lasted since 1970. So that's how I can know Christ as my Savior. I think you asked earlier how I came to Faith. Faith Baptist Church, not Faith.
Both.
I was pastoring in Michigan, maybe with a church similar size to our church, and just was tired of deacons, and I just had a different passion. I wanted to be more evangelistic and emphasizing the neighborhood and connection, and I won't get into all of the stories. But when Faith reached out to me, because they knew my daughter taught at the school, and so I knew them, and they asked if I wanted to be part of it. It didn't take me a lot of time to sense this was God's leading, because it was to be with a church that already had a vision. They wanted to make a difference. It wasn't battling deacons. They were already on the same page and being used of God. So it's been a joy to be here. But I can't say enough. The words on the back of the shirt, creating a culture of evangelism in our church, that strikes a real joy and passion with me. And I want to be challenged. And sadly, I admit sometimes, I look over the years and why wasn't I sharing the gospel more? And even after this Permeate, just so it wasn't a one and done. So I'm sitting with the barber, and I'm praying for opportunities, God, every day. Don't bring divine appointments to me, God. Let me see the divine appointments that he's bringing. And so I'm sitting in the chair. This girl's cutting my hair, and so she says, "What are you going to do later in the day?" Well, I'm kind of retired now, but I, work with the church and so forth still. I said, "Well, I'm going back to the office to do something." "What are you doing?" Well, I told her I'm a pastor at Faith. "Oh, nice." And then I turned it around and said, "Well, do you go to church?" And she said, No, I've been there once. I said, "Well, let me ask you a question." And this is an Evangelism Explosion kind of question. What do you think is the purpose of church? So now I've gone with that question from talking about the secular. Now I'm pointing it towards the religious. And she said, oh, this is for community, and and I said, well, I love community in our church and people getting together, but it has to be more than community. And I talked about it as a relationship with God, and we talked about that. But again, having this culture of evangelism excites me and it awakens me.